Hello, everyone, and welcome to one more session on physiology of endocrine glands. So, today's session is based on the hypothalamic and posterior pituitary hormones. This is classes according to the CBME curriculum. I'm Dr. Swati Tikare from Alamein Medical College. So, as you know, we are continuing with the competency PY 8.2. The objectives for today's session are that by the end of this class, the student should be able to understand the following concepts on hypothalamus, list the hormones secreted by the hypothalamus, and discuss the functions of each. Discuss the hypothalamus pituitary gland axis in detail with examples. Coming to the pituitary gland, we would like to describe the functional anatomy of pituitary gland, list the hormones secreted by the pituitary, posterior pituitary, and lastly, list the actions and factors controlling the secretions of oxytocin and vasopressin. So these are the objectives for today's session. So let's begin the class. Coming first to the hypothalamus. So since the CNS might not have been completed for you right now, so hypothalamus location, it is located below two structures, which is called as the thalamus, right and the left thalamus. Below that, this part of the hypothalamus is there. One more view to show the location of the hypothalamus. So this is the location of the hypothalamus here near the third ventricle. So hypothalamus is made up of numerous nuclei. Nuclei are groups of neurons which subserve a particular function. So hypothalamus in general has several important functions which we will be learning in the under the central nervous system. But here we are going to learn about only the endocrine functions of the hypothalamus. So coming to the list of the endocrine functions of hypothalamus, first is the hypothalamus produces releasing and inhibiting hormones that controls the anterior pituitary secretion. So hypothalamus releasing hormones and inhibiting hormones have the action on anterior pituitary hormone, which acts as the target organ here for the hormones of the hypothalamus. Next function is hypothalamus is the location or site where the posterior pituitary hormones are synthesized. So the posterior pituitary hormones are not synthesized by the posterior pituitary, but they are actually synthesized in the hypothalamus. We will learn about it much detail later on. So these are the two main hormones related to hypothalamus, releasing and inhibiting hormones and synthesis of the posterior pituitary hormones. So how is this hypothalamus and pituitary connected to each other? So this is a very important and interesting uh, aspect of how hypothalamus is connected to the pituitary connection, pituitary gland. So this is a very simplistic diagram that you will definitely have to practice how to write this diagram. So, so the top portion, okay, is the hypothalamus. This is the hypothalamus. There is one dipper. So please start writing the diagram from this way, the depression here and then the depression here and then going down this way. And then between there is a stalk and here we have a bigger anterior pituitary and on the this side we have the smaller posterior pituitary. Okay. So there is a capillary network at the hypothalamic end and one capillary network at the anterior pituitary end connected by the vessels. So let's learn more about how it is connected. So first thing is the anterior pituitary. You can see that the hypothalamus to anterior pituitary is by vascular connection via hypophyseal portal system. That means the maximum connection between the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary is vascular in nature, and you can see all the hormones that are produced in the hypothalamus are coming and getting released into the scapulary network, and then it is getting carried through the portal vessels to the anterior pituitary. So basically, most important thing we need to remember, the connection between hypothalamus and anterior pituitary is vascular in nature. Whereas the connection between hypothalamus to posterior pituitary is a neural one. There is a neural connection through hypothalamo-hypophyseal neural tract. Okay, so remember, hypophysis is another name for pituitary. So hypothalamo-hypophyseal neural tract. So you can see this is the neural tract from the neurons or nuclei of the hypothalamus. If this tract is coming lower down and ending here in the posterior pituitary. So the connection between hypothalamus and posterior pituitary is a neural one. Next. So this is one more diagram showing the connection between the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary being a vascular one, and hypothalamus and posterior pituitary being a neural one. Okay, that the previous one was the more simpler diagram, which you can actually write down and use it for your exams also. So next, coming to what hormones, releasing and inhibiting hormones. What are the releasing and inhibiting hormones produced by the hypothalamus? So they are also called as hypothalamic hypophysiotropic hormones. Okay. So why hypophysiotropic? They are acting on hypophysis, that is the pituitary. Okay. So they are tropic to it. Very important for it to act on the anterior pituitary. So they are called hypophysiotropic hormones. Let's see the list. First one is the thyrotropin releasing hormone. Okay, TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone, TRH. Then corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH. Third, gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH. Next, for growth hormone, we have a releasing hormone, GHRH, and an inhibiting hormone, GHIH. Similarly, for prolactin, also we have a releasing hormone and an inhibiting hormone. Prolactin releasing hormone, TRH, and prolactin inhibiting hormone, PIH. So, where do these hormones act? Means they act on the anterior pituitary. Let's see what they do. What is their action on anterior pituitary? So, effects on the anterior pituitary. So, TRH stimulates the release of thyrotropin or thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, these terms are a bit confusing, and sometimes when a question is asked or when we see a report, we should not get confused one with the other. Okay, so the fixed, if you want a one word name for the hormones, you should understand that for hypothalamic hormone, usually the name of the anterior pituitary hormone that they are stimulating or inhibiting comes here in the hypothalamus. Okay, thyrotropin releasing hormone. Now, the hormone that is produced in the anterior pituitary is thyrotropin itself. The other name for it is thyroid stimulating hormone. The rest of the nomenclatures also are similar. I'm not going to point out for everything. You can make it out. So, CRH stimulates the release of ACTH, adenocorticotropic hormone, stimulating hormone. ACTH stimulating hormone, that is corticotropin. Okay, next, coming to gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH. GnRH stimulates the release of two hormones. One is follicular stimulating hormone, FSH, and other is LH or luteinizing hormone. All these hormones we will be learning under anterior pituitary again. So now we just have to tell that what is the action of these hypothalamic hormones on the anterior pituitary. That's what we are trying to tell. So gonadotropin releasing hormone releases FSH and LH together called as gonadotropins. Whereas the growth hormone releasing hormone stimulates release of growth hormone from anterior pituitary. The inhibitory hormones similarly inhibits the release of growth hormone. The prolactin releasing hormone stimulates release of prolactin, and prolactin inhibiting hormone inhibits the release of prolactin. So these are a list of hypothalamic releasing and inhibiting hormones and their actions on the anterior pituitary. So this picture is again showing stepwise how the stimulating hormones are, the hypothalamic hormones. All these are hypothalamic hormones, how they act on the anterior pituitary and produce the anterior pituitary hormones. Whereas the anterior pituitary hormones themselves are stimulating further other target endocrine glands. Okay, other target endocrine glands or other target organs also to stimulate further some other hormone. Okay, so we will see this step by step as we go ahead. Now, a little summary of the functional anatomy of the pituitary gland. So we already know hypothalamus has a bunch of nuclei which are producing some hormones. Okay, so many of the neurosecretory hormones, whatever the hormones are produced, releasing and inhibitory, they are released into the vascular system here. Okay, so we have the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary, as I said, is richly vascular. There are two capillary systems, one at the top near the hypothalamus, one at the bottom near the anterior pituitary. This capillary plexus is supplied by superior hypophyseal artery. Okay, and you know that normally we have an artery giving way to capillary bed, then there is a venule. But here we have two capillary beds connected by a vessel. So such a vessel is called as the portal vessel. So we have a portal system here, similar to what you might have learned in liver. Also there is a portal system. So this is basically about the anterior pituitary gland. Whereas coming to the posterior pituitary gland, it is basically supplied with small amount of blood, and it is by inferior hypophyseal artery, whereas it is richly supplied with neural connections from the hypothalamus. Okay, so this is the functional anatomy of pituitary gland. So moving on, we know that anterior pituitary, we have seen it releases these 6 hormones, TSH, ACTH, LH, FSH, growth hormone and prolactin, whereas the posterior pituitary releases, I am not using the word synthesizes, but it releases oxytocin and vasopressin. So in today's topic, we will be covering only the posterior pituitary hormones, that is oxytocin and vasopressin. And in the next class, we will go to the anterior pituitary hormones. So moving on, let's see a little more basic things related to the posterior pituitary gland. Okay, so this is a very simple diagram of the hypothalamus, the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract, and the infundibulum, and the anterior and posterior pituitary. So developmentally, the posterior pituitary is actually a part of brain. It is coming from the floor of the third ventricle. That's the reason we can understand that it is basically having more neural connection rather than the vascular connection. And blood supply, as we saw in the previous slide, it is from the inferior hypophyseal artery. So the hormones of posterior pituitary are actually ADH, that is antidiuretic hormone, and oxytocin. but they are not synthesized here, but they are only stored here. Okay, they are only stored in the posterior pituitary. They are actually synthesized in the hypothalamus. Okay, during the storage here, they are stored along with specific proteins, binding proteins, what we call. Here, the specific binding protein is a neurophysin. So the ADH or oxytocin are present in bound form along with the neurophysin. So remember that whenever the hormone is in a bound form, it is still not doing its action. Only when it is released from its binding protein, then it becomes an active hormone. This was some basic about the posterior pituitary. Next. So the source of the posterior pituitary hormones, as we were always talking about, is from the hypothalamic nuclei. In the hypothalamic nuclei, two hormones are produced, that is ADH or vasopressin. Okay, antidiuretic hormone. It is produced by the supraoptic nuclei, SON, in short. And oxytocin is produced by the paraventricular nuclei, that is PVN, of the hypothalamus. And via the hypophyseopituitary tract reaches the posterior pituitary, where it is stored and packaged as secretory granules and transported down the neural tracts and stored in the neuronal terminals within the posterior pituitary. What we saw here in the previous diagram, the hormone in addition with the neurophysin. It is stored here in the nerve ending. So we have learned that the site of production of the antidiuretic hormone is supraoptic nucleus. It is a polypeptide hormone made up of about 8 amino acids. Its half-life is 16 to 20 minutes. So there's the type of specific and ADH in humans is called as arginine vasopressin, and this ADH is released on specific stimulation of the supraoptic nucleus. Okay, so when it is stimulated, the stimulus passes through the neural tract. Okay, this passes through the neural tract, and at the nerve terminal, at the end in the posterior pituitary, it causes entry of calcium inside, and calcium binds to the secretory granules. And once it binds to the secretory granules, it causes the release of ADH into the blood by exocytosis. So this is how the ADH or vasopressin is actually synthesized in the hypothalamus, in the supraoptic nucleus, transported via the neural tract, and stored in the neuron terminals in the posterior pituitary, and released on stimulation into the blood. Now, coming to the functions of ADH. Okay, the most and foremost function of ADH is, if we should remember, antidiuretic hormone. What does the name say? Diuresis means loss of fluid into the urine. Okay, diuresis. So it is not allowing, antidiuresis. That means it is not allowing fluid that is passing through the nephrons to go to become urine. That means it is helping to reabsorb it. Okay, so this basic thing, if you remember, it is antidiuretic hormone. We can remember its function well. So it acts basically on distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct. Okay, so the distal collecting, DCT, distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting duct. This portion it is going to. How does it do? So it causes reabsorption of water from these two areas, DCT and collecting duct. Let's see a diagram and try to understand this better. So this particular diagram is showing a capillary on one end, okay, the blood vessel on one end. Then this is a cell of the collecting duct. Okay, this is a cell of the collecting duct. This is the luminal side. Okay, this is the luminal side, and this is what we call it as the basolateral side of the collecting duct. So now ADH is coming and reaching this particular area through the blood. Okay, ADH. This ADH will bind to a ADH is a protein hormone. So it is going to bind. I hope you can recall. It will have receptor on the cell or within the cell. So it is going to have a receptor on the surface because it is hydrophilic. It cannot enter inside. So it has a receptor here on the surface. This is the B2 receptor on the surface. When ADH binds to this V2 receptor, hormone receptor complex is formed. You recall the mechanism of action now. It activates the G protein, activates the adenyl cyclase, converts ATP to cyclic AMP, and protein kinases are activated. And now this is bringing about the action. What is that action? The aquaporins. Okay, what are aquaporins? Aquaporins are water channels. Okay, these water channels here are present inside the cell now. Once the protein kinase are activated, this aquaporine or water channels go and get inserted on the luminal side of the collecting duct. See, this is the same thing that is coming and sitting over here. So numerous aquaporine channels come and line up here on the luminal side. This will allow absorption of water. So you can see how the mechanism flows. The function of ADH is absorption of water here. After some time, the aquaporins, their action will stop. Again, aquaporins will be internalized. They come back here. Okay. So this is the function of the ADH and the mechanism by which it is acting. Causes reabsorption of water from the DCT and collecting duct. Okay, so remember here, whenever there is reabsorption of water, that means water is getting added into the body. The extracellular fluid volume will increase, the blood volume will increase, whereas urine output will decrease. Okay, so this is the first and foremost function of ADH. Coming to the next function, the ADH decreases the renal medullary blood flow and makes medullary interstitium more hypertonic. Okay, this also you might have learned in the renal system related to how it is useful in making a concentrated urine. Okay, it reduces the renal medullary blood flow and makes medullary interstitium more hypertonic. Third important action is on the blood vessels. We all have learned that vasopressin is the other name of ADH. So why it is named like that? Because it is causing vasoconstriction of the peripheral blood vessels. So it is also other name is vasopressin. And this acts via V1 receptors, and whenever there is vasoconstriction, you know it will cause increase in the blood pressure. One more minor function of ADH is ADH acts on the anterior pituitary and increases the ACTH secretion. So in this way, the ADH is having important functions related to water reabsorption. Now let's see the regulation of ADH secretion. Regulation of ADH secretion. The most important factors which regulate the secretion are first one, osmolality, and second is the ECF volume. So osmolality is a word you might have learned in general physiology, but let me just recall that word for you so that you understand. So osmolality is nothing but how concentrated something is or how diluted it is in simple terms. Okay. So if I have to give an actual definition, osmolality is the concentration of the substance in 1 liter of water divided by its molecular weight. So how much is the normal osmolality of the plasma normally? It is between 275 to 295 milliosmoles is the normal osmolality of the plasma. Now, if it is less than this, less than 275, we say that it is hypoosmolality. And if it is more than 295, we say that fluid has become hyperosmolality. Okay, so hypo and hyper. So once we know this, let's see how osmolality affects the ADH secretion. We begin this flowchart. It's a very simple one. Everywhere, please remember, flowchart helps us to understand better, present our thoughts better, express ourselves better, and it is easy for the person who is saying it also to understand better. Okay, and it is easy and quick to write in the exams. So always use two things which are very useful in exams are, one are the diagrams, which need not be elaborate, but they should be illustrative and well labeled. And the second important things are the flow charts, which are very useful. Okay, so let's begin with the at the top. So where we have started here, a condition where osmolality is more. That means there are too much of solutes in the body. It is too over concentrated. Okay. So increased osmolality. What does it do? It stimulates the osmoreceptors in hypothalamus. Okay. In the hypothalamus, there are certain osmoreceptors which are present outside the blood-brain barrier. And once it senses the ECF that it is having too much osmolality, it gets stimulated. The osmoreceptor stimulates the hypothalamus and the posterior pituitary releases ADH. Okay? So antidiuretic hormone. What do we know about the action of antidiuretic hormone? It acts on the kidneys, on the DCT and collecting, and it will increase water reabsorption. So once water is reabsorbed, what will happen to the concentration? It will come down. The osmolality, which was very high in the beginning, it will come back towards the normal. Okay. Simultaneously, what other effect it will have? It may also increase the plasma volume. Okay. So let's see. We began with a condition where osmolality was very high, and due to the action of ADH, the osmolality is brought down. Suppose now the osmolality is very low. We begin with, please write one more flowchart where you begin with decreased osmolality. So when there is decreased osmolality, there is no stimulation of the osmoreceptors. Posterior pituitary is not stimulated. ADH is not secreted. And when ADH is not secreted, that there is decreased absorption of water. Okay, when there is decreased absorption of water, the reverse happens. We started with decreased osmolality. Now there is increased osmolality. Okay, so this way there is the increased osmolality stimulates ADH secretion, whereas the decreased osmolality decreases the ADH secretion. Okay, they are contradictory. Increased osmolality, sorry, they're not contradictory, they go hand in hand. If whenever there is increased osmolality, there is increase in ADH, and if osmolality decrease, there is decrease in ADH. This is how osmolality plays a role in regulating the ADH secretion. Next, we will go to ECF volume, how it is doing. Okay, so we will begin with this particular situation where there is decreased ECF volume. Okay, ECF volume is basically sensed in the great veins. That means superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and the atrias, right and the left atrias, basically in the right atria. There are many receptors, volume receptors. Okay, when if this ECF volume reduces, all these volume receptors are stimulated and they send the nerve impulses to the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus, it reaches the supraoptic nucleus. So once it stimulates that there is decreased ECF volume, then there is increase in the ADH secretion. Okay. So here you may get confused what wordings we have written here. When there is decreased stimulation, decreased nerve impulses, then the hypothalamus is less inhibited and hence the ADH secretion is increased. Okay, that means basically it has an inhibitory action, and when there is no inhibition, it will increase the ADH secretion. It is a double negative. Okay, so the normal idea is supraoptic nucleus is always inhibiting the ADH secretion. But now that there are no impulses, its inhibition is reduced. So ADH secretion is increased. If you can remember this, it is well and fine. If not, you can directly write it as decreased nerve impulses reach the hypothalamus and hence ADH secretion is increased. That suffices. Okay. The reverse thing happens if there is increased volume or increased ECF volume. So volume receptors are all stimulated and there is increased nerve impulse. And when there are more nerve impulses, ADH secretion is inhibited. Okay. So there is one more thing that osmolality and ECF both contradicting each other, volume has to be maintained. Otherwise, blood pressure cannot be maintained, blood flow cannot be maintained. So hypovolemia is more powerful stimulant than hyperosmolality. So these are the two important factors regulating ADH secretion. One is osmolality and the other is blood volume. Let us see a combined effect, how it works. Okay, so whenever plasma osmolality increases, that means there is over concentration of the solutes, or if the blood volume has decreased, okay, both this will stimulate the osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus. What do? They do two things. One is they stimulate ADH secretion from the posterior pituitary, reabsorption in the kidneys. So there is increased water intake and water retention. Similarly, they also stimulate the thirst center and there is increased drinking. This also results in increased water intake and water retention. This causes restoration of the ECF volume. Initially, there was decreased blood volume. So restoration of the blood ECF volume or blood volume and the osmolality. Okay, so this is a combined effect of the osmolality and plasma volume, how they act via the ADH as well as the thirst mechanisms to bring about their restoration to the normal things. So with this, we can understand that ADH plays a role in ECF volume regulation, blood volume regulation, and blood pressure regulation also. So what are the other factors regulating the ADH secretion? Now we can understand that blood volume and blood pressure will also affect the ADH secretion. Okay. So how? They are contradictory. If blood pressure increases, ADH will decrease. If it decreases, ADH will increase. Similarly, blood volume. Okay. Blood volume also having reverse relationship. If blood volume increases, ADH will decrease, or if it decreases, ADH will increase. Okay. So blood volume and blood pressure have inverse relationship with ADH secretion. That would sum up the whole thing. Then the other stimulants for ADH secretion are pain and stressful conditions like exercise, surgery, emotions. All this are increasing the ADH secretion. Coming to the applied aspects of diabetes of ADH, the first one is about diabetes insipidus. So you might have heard this word diabetes insipidus earlier too. So what is this diabetes insipidus? Just remember here, here there is deficiency of ADH. Okay, if there is no ADH, what will happen? Water will not be reabsorbed and all water is lost. Okay, so this is the main principal thing that we have to remember related to diabetes insipidus, that ADH is deficient, water is not getting reabsorbed, all water is lost as urine. So what will we find? So let's define the diabetes insipidus. We'll understand excretion of large volume of dilute urine due to deficiency of ADH, or when kidneys fail to respond to the hormone, is known as diabetes insipidus. Okay, so the principal thing here is excretion of large volume of dilute urine. So there are two types of diabetes insipidus: central or neurogenic diabetes insipidus, where the ADH is not produced. Okay, there is no synthesis of ADH at all. Second category, where ADH is of course produced, but the kidney is not respond to it. What we call it as nephrogenic diabetes insipidus, insensitive to ADH. Okay, so these are the two ones, neurogenic and nephrogenic diabetes insipidus. Let's see what are the causes, what could be the causes for diabetes insipidus. Very easy to remember. Any disease, okay, any disease process may be cancerous, that is neoplastic, traumatic, vascular lesion, infection involving either the supraoptic nucleus or paraventricular nucleus, or the hypothalamo hypophyseal tract, or the posterior pituitary gland. So the problem may be in the hypothalamus and the tract or in posterior pituitary gland, anywhere can lead to deficiency of ADH. Coming down, the defect may also be there in the receptor. First thing is that hormone itself is not produced or it is not transported. Second, it is that congenital defect in V2 receptors. We saw they were the receptors binding the ADH. Third, there is autosomal gene mutation of aquaporin 2. Okay, the aquaporin 2, where proteins, ionic channels, water channels present within the cell. If there is some problem, gene mutation to that particular protein, then also it can lead to diabetes insipidus. So now we learned the definition, then the causes of diabetes insipidus and types of diabetes insipidus. Now coming to the clinical features. Clinical features, it is very simple. There is polyuria, water diuresis, that means excess of dilute urine is being excreted ranging from 3 to 20 liters per day. That is polyuria. So the word polyuria is used for both the things, either the frequency is increased or the quantity of urine is increased. Okay, any of them is called as polyuria. So once so much of water loss is there, the person is very thirsty, what is called as polydipsia, increased thirst due to excessive loss of water. So basically, these are the true important features of the diabetes mellitus. Coming to the treatment, clofebrate is the treatment that is given. One drug. Second drug is that will reduce the ADH, increase the ADH secretion, clofebrate. And the second drug is chlorpropamide, increases renal response to vasopressin. So this is about the diabetes insipidus. Next, we will move on to one more applied aspect related to excess secretion of ADH. Okay, so diabetes insipidus was about deficiency of ADH. This is about excess secretion of ADH, what is called as SIADH, syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion. So we can define this syndrome as inappropriate and excessive ADH secretion either from posterior pituitary or an ectopic source. Okay, so ADH may not be produced only from the posterior pituitary. There are certain tumors which produce ADH. And one of the most classical example of such tumors is the bronchogenic carcinoma. This produces the ADH. So the definition of SIADH is inappropriate and excessive ADH secretion either from the posterior pituitary or any other ectopic source. Coming to the pathophysiology, what happens during SIADH? Let's have a look. So we have excess of, to begin with, we have an excess of ADH, that is nothing but resulting in lot of water retention. And when there is water retention, the ECF volume is increased and the blood volume is also increased. So when both of them are increased, actually it results in the reduction in the formation of a hormone, that is aldosterone. Okay, let me tell what is this aldosterone. See, aldosterone is a hormone which will increase sodium, basically. Okay, so suppose whenever aldosterone is stimulated, it will reabsorb sodium. But along with reabsorbing sodium, it does not keep quiet. Along with sodium comes water. So now in excess ADH secretion, already so much of water is there. Okay, so whenever ADH is excess, that's why it will reduce the aldosterone secretion. Okay, so now aldosterone secretion is decreased means there is decrease in the sodium reabsorption. So if there is decreased reabsorption, excess of it is lost in the urine. So increased sodium excretion. There is increased sodium excretion. See how one thing leads to the other. It's a vicious cycle. So now what's happening? There is hyponatremia inside the body. Excess sodium is getting excreted. Hypernatriuria. In the urine, excess urine sodium called hypernatriuria. Whereas within the body, there is less sodium. That is hyponatremia. So this results in a situation where in plasma, there is hypoosmolality. Hypoosmolality means decreased sodium will cause, sodium is the main content which will maintain the osmolality. If sodium is decreased, there is overall decrease in the osmolality. Okay. So in plasma now, we have hypoosmolality and increased volume. Whereas in the urine, it is hyperosmolality and decreased volume. Very little is of urine is excreted. Okay. So coming to the clinical features, we know so much of water is getting reabsorbed due to excess of ADH. There is water intoxication, overhydration or dilutional syndrome, hyponatremia, hypernatriuria, and really excretion of a concentrated urine. These are the typical features of syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion. The treatment is demiclocycline. It prevents the action of ADH on kidney. Okay, even though excess of ADH is coming either from posterior pituitary or from any ectopic, its action is prevented by on the kidney using this drug called demiclocycline. Now let's see a pictorial depiction of this diabetes insipidus and syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion. Concentrate on the right side of the panel, diabetes insipidus. Okay, what was it? ADH was deficient. No ADH means no water absorption. All water is lost. So inside the person is dehydrated, dry inside, dehydrated. BP is falling, skin is dry. Okay, sodium is less. Then, but urine output is more. Dilute urine output is there. Dilute, lots of urine output is there. Whereas the reverse of it, in SIADH, it is excess of ADH. It is a soaked inside. That means so much of ADH, so much of water is getting reabsorbed that osmolality will be less. Okay, the solutes here, white dots which are shown are like solutes. They are reduced. Whereas if water is so much, ECF volume and all is increased, then the blood pressure will be high. going towards the high side, then even in the brain, there is a pressure. So that is may cause some neural symptoms also, whereas urine output is very much reduced. Okay. This is a pictorial depiction of diabetes insipidus and SIADH. This will definitely help you to remember the things little easily. So next, moving on to the last hormone of the posterior pituitary, that is the oxytocin. Site of production of oxytocin is paraventricular nucleus of hypothalamus. Some of the times you get confused with SON and PVN, which is producing what? The best mnemonic to remember that is, remember SONA, SONA, as SONA, so that sun supraoptic nucleus produces ADH, whereas PVN produces oxytocin, PVN. Okay, so similarly to the ADH, it is produced in the hypothalamus, transported via the neural tract to posterior pituitary, stored in the nerve terminals in the posterior pituitary, along with the neurohypophysin, and it is released by the posterior pituitary gland, and on receiving some specific stimulus to the hypothalamus. Okay, and then it is released into the blood by exocytosis. Oxytocin is also a peptide hormone. It is having an 8 amino acid chain. Okay, so coming to the functions of oxytocin. The first function is it causes milk ejection in lactation. This is a neuroendocrinal reflex. Okay, you will understand how the neuro and endocrine are connected to each other, and there is release of the milk here. We will learn that in detail. Causes milk ejection reflex in lactation. Second, facilitates parturition process. Parturition is the process of birth of the baby, but it does not initiate labor. It only facilitates the parturition. Third function, increases sperm transport in female genital tract. Fourth, in males, facilitates sperm transport from epididymis to urethra during ejaculation. So these are the functions of oxytocin. We will begin with the neuroendocrinal reflex, that is the milk ejection. Okay, how it happens. So the initial stimulus for the release of oxytocin is the suckling of breast by the newborn baby. This produces the nerve impulses and they reach the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is stimulated and it relays the impulse to the posterior pituitary gland where it has stored the oxytocin. And on receiving the stimulus, the posterior pituitary gland releases the oxytocin. Oxytocin reaches the breast gland and causes contraction of the myoepithelial cells of the breast glands. Okay, the contraction causes release of milk. Once milk is ejected, the baby receives the milk and it continues the suckling. And as it continues the suckling, this whole process keeps repeating and the milk is continuously released. Due to this, this is a neuroendocrine reflex that is called, because it's starting with the suckling of the breast and it is going to the hypothalamus. There is a coordination between the neural and the hormonal aspects for the particular action. Hence, it is called as a neuroendocrinal reflex. You have to remember this in this context also, because the question can be asked in this format too. Explain neuroendocrinal reflex itself may be a question. So this is about it. Next, coming to facilitates parturition process. So the process of birth. What happens is when the process of birth or labor has started, the head of the baby has come downwards and it is placed at the cervix. It will go, whenever it stimulates the cervix, it goes and stimulates the cervix, this sends the signals to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is going to release oxytocin from the posterior pituitary, and oxytocin reaches the uterus. It causes the contraction of the uterine muscles. It acts on the uterine muscles and causes contraction, and with the uterine contraction, the baby is pushed further downwards and it presses against the cervix. With this was the initial stimulus for the hypothalamus to produce oxytocin, but this becomes a positive feedback mechanism. What we were learned once in the general endocrinology class, that this is an example for the positive feedback mechanism. The suckling of the baby, the new previous one was also an example for the positive feedback mechanism, where the cycle becomes a vicious cycle. More and more is happening for the same stimulus. It is not more, starts with more and becomes less. Not like that. So here the baby is pressing against the cervix. More and more stimulus reaches the hypothalamus and more of oxytocin is released, and thus ultimately, when there is cervical dilatation, the passage of baby into the vaginal canal and expulsion of the baby. So this is how oxytocin plays a major role in the process of parturition. Coming to the regulation of oxytocin. So the first part already we have understood, that is positive feedback from breast, that is during the suckling and milk ejection reflex. Positive reflex from the cervix and vagina during the parturition. These are the positive feedback mechanisms in the regulation of oxytocin. The factors which decrease oxytocin secretion are: one, emotional stress and some psychic factors. Second, activation of the sympathetic system. So emotional stress and sympathetic activation are two important major things which can actually decrease the oxytocin secretion. Remember, there is something called as conditioned oxytocin secretion. Okay. Once the mother gets used to this secretion of the milk via the suckling reflex, even in the absence of the baby suckling, even a cry or sound of the baby causes release of oxytocin. So this is called as conditioned oxytocin secretion. So overall, this is the regulation of the oxytocin. We have positive feedback mechanisms, major action, then some factors which decrease oxytocin secretion, and a conditioned oxytocin secretion. Coming to the applied aspects, oxytocin is used therapeutically. One, for acceleration of labor process. That means when therapeutically it is given, the oxytocin from outside as a drug, it can accelerate by causing more uterine contractions. It can accelerate the labor process. Control PPH. PPH means postpartum bleeding. So after the delivery of the baby, normally the uterus is very relaxed. And if the uterus is in a relaxed state, there is a lot of bleeding happening because it was enlarged in the beginning with the baby. And suddenly, with the expulsion of the baby, the uterus is so hugely sized, there will be a lot of bleeding from occurring from there. So if we can give oxytocin, it will cause uterine contraction and stop the bleeding. Or it can also be used to relieve breast engorgement in lactating mother. So these are the applied aspects related to oxytocin. So this is all about the today's class. That is, we wanted to complete these portions. We have listed the hormones secreted by the hypothalamus, the releasing and inhibiting hormones, and discussed how they have, what are their functions, how they act on the anterior pituitary, Then we have discussed the hypothalamo-pituitary gland axis, that is anterior pituitary connected vascularly and the posterior pituitary connected by neural connections to the hypothalamus. In the pituitary gland, we have understood the functional anatomy of the pituitary gland, the presence of the portal system there between the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. We have listed the hormones secreted by the posterior pituitary, ADH and oxytocin. Remember, they are actually the hormones synthesized by the hypothalamus, only stored in the posterior pituitary and later released. So these are basically the the hypothalamic hormones, but stored in posterior pituitary and released from there. So we have also learned the actions of oxytocin and vasopressin in detail. We have also learned the factors that are controlling, that is regulation of their secretions. We have also learned the applied aspects related to ADH, that is diabetes insipidus and SIADH and oxytocin. So this completes the today's objectives related to hypothalamus and posterior pituitary gland. Thank you.